Hello and welcome to the hottest day we've had in a very long time. Hope you guys are all hiding somewhere inside with air conditioning. Hi everyone, welcome. Yeah, I was just saying I hope that everyone is staying cool today. I was like gonna try and get all primed up, and then I was like, you know what? It's 1,000 degrees out and it's a ponytail and t-shirt kind of day. It's like the gross weather too. It's like not even hot and sunny. It's like hot and cloudy and humid, which is the worst in my opinion. Maybe you guys, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're not floating the river or at the beach. If you are, then I applaud your multitasking. But you guys are probably the ones hiding inside like me, which I think seemed like a smart choice today. I might try to brave the river tomorrow. Depending. We'll see. But yeah, happy to have you guys today. I actually didn't know I was going to be this excited to talk about Emilia Romagna. Rosie wants up right away. Starting the day strong. Hi, Noma. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's one of those regions where, some Italian regions like Piedmont and Tuscany and even, Sicily, we kind of immediately have these cultural attachments to them, and they're kind of romantic and we've heard about them. And Emilia Romagna, at least for me, doesn't necessarily have that. And it was really fun to research it because what I was finding, I was like, oh my gosh, that comes from Emilia Romagna. This comes from Emilia Romagna. Like, wow, there's all this cool stuff about the region. And it's a really fun, diverse landscape. Oh, okay. She's really excited that we're live. Thank you, honey. I love you too. Let's talk about wine now. Hi, Nicole. Welcome. So I guess one of the things that if you do know about Emilia Romagna, is one of the things we associate with it is food. So the capital is Bologna. And Bologna, I mean, some Italians would argue with you from different regions, but Bologna is sort of widely considered the gastronomical capital of Italy. And once we start talking at some point about the foods that come from there, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I see why that is. But things like Parmesan, prosciutto, balsamic vinegar, they're famous for these egg-based pastas. So they developed styles like tagliatelle, pappardelle, tortellini, and cured meats. I mean, obviously bologna, we can say bologna, but I don't think Italians actually eat that. They eat a fancier version, but mortadella. They did their famous version of salami, so they're really well known for cured meats. And one interesting thing, which we'll talk about why this is, but their food is based not in olive oil like a lot of Italy is, but actually in dairy. So butter is sort of their base cooking ingredient, which is different than a lot of Italy. And so it makes their cuisine heavier and richer. And it's where we get a lot of the, I don't want to say Americanized Italian dishes, but, obviously pasta bolognese and ragu, and these kind of like heavier meat-based, like hearty pasta dishes originate from that region. So one of the main reasons that it's become a gastronomical capital of Italy and of the world is that it actually is home to Europe's oldest university, the University of Bologna, which was started in 1088, I believe. Yes. And so that automatically brought in all of these, because it was one of the first major universities in Europe, people started coming to it from all over. And so all of these diverse people were coming in, and it made it sort of a melting pot. And apparently, I've never been there, but apparently even culturally, it has a very progressive, kind of young, hip vibe to it. If anyone's been there, please chime in. But I've heard that it actually feels a lot like Portland in a lot of ways. There's like a lot of young people with tattoos and piercings who are, politically active. And it's a big food city. And so it seems like there's some fun parallels between Bologna and Portland. Again, if any of you have been there, I'd be curious to hear. It's also just a big cultural hub. Apparently, it's one of the most beautiful regions in Italy. There's a ton of Roman architecture, Renaissance architecture. Again, because of this kind of melding pot. It's like Portland, but a million years old. I love that. That's super cool. Makes me want to go. But it's just always been this melting pot of different ideas and diversity because of that university. And so it kind of has this college town sort of feel. And it's also, for those of you car lovers out there, it's sort of the automotive capital of Italy. So all of the big names are from there. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, Ducati, which is crazy. They're all from the same region. And you'll see there's a region called Ferrara, which we can see that Ferrari got its name from. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening there. So let's look at it on a map, because, you know, like me, I was like, where is it even exactly? So again, I know this is going to be backwards on Instagram, but I'll put this up to the screen. This is the zoomed in version of Italy, which we all are familiar with, but you can see it's on the Adriatic side, but it actually stretches almost all the way to the Mediterranean. So it almost borders both, but not quite. And this is a zoomed in version of the region itself. So closest to the Adriatic here, oh God, I'm reading this backwards. We have Rimini. Ravenna is another really well-known region. That's where the Albana is from, the white wine we're going to be drinking. Ferrara is up here, where the cars come from. And then Bologna is right here in the middle. So one interesting thing to note is the region is called Emilia Romagna, and it's actually two regions, Emilia and Romagna. And I couldn't actually find why we grouped the two together. I'm not really sure why that is, because anything east of Bologna is Romagna, and anything west of Bologna is Emilia. And they actually have distinctive cultural heritages. So I'm not quite sure why we group them together. It might be because the city of Bologna and that region, again, sort of brings everyone together. And I'm not sure. But right here we have Modena, which is where the Lambrusco comes from. It's also where Aceto Balsamico de Modena comes from. So that's where the vinegar. And there's some fun parallels between Lambrusco and balsamic, which we'll talk about. Here's Reggio Emilia and Parma. So Parma is prosciutto di Parma. That's where that comes from. And then Parmigiano, Reggiano, de Emilia is the last one, I believe. And that sort of comes from both of these regions here. So a lot of fun stuff. It's a very fertile region. So just a quick little blurb on the geography of it. We have the Adriatic to the east, which gives us kind of some cooling coastal influence. We're almost touching the Mediterranean on the west, so you get a little bit of cooling influence there. And then to the north, it doesn't show it on this map, but to the north of the whole region is a river called the Po River, which helps with irrigation, helps bring, moisture to the region. And then below the region is the Apennine, or I don't know if it's Apennine, I'm not sure. But it's a mountain range. Hi, Luke, welcome. So it's got a river to the top. It's got mountains to the bottom. It's got oceans to the west, or Adriatic to the west, and almost the Mediterranean to the east. So all of those things have something in common, which is they provide water. So it is a very water-rich region. It is pretty humid, apparently. And so irrigation is never an issue. And central Emilia, further from the Adriatic, apparently is pretty humid, and it rains basically year-round. Sounds familiar. And there's a lot of thunderstorms, and it's not until you get closer to the Adriatic that it gets a little drier, because you get those cooling breezes coming off the Adriatic. But all of that means that it's a very fertile region, which sometimes can be not exactly what you want for grapes, but it's sort of the breadbasket of, at least of northern Italy. And it was making me think of the Loire Valley when I was studying. If you remember, if you were back to our very first wine tasting with the Loire is also a very fertile river region that is a big producer of meats, cheeses, produce, all of this stuff for the area around it. And similarly to the Loire, the wines that have come out of both the Loire and Emilia Romagna were always considered like great table drinking everyday wines. They were mostly consumed within the region itself or in neighboring Italy. And they produced a lot of wine, but it was never had necessarily the prestige that, you know, Barolo and Barbaresco from Piedmont and some of the great, you know, Tuscan Sangioveses have. And that's changing a little bit, but it's always been sort of known for like great everyday drinking, fun, diverse styles of wine. They grow a lot of different grape varietals. They make sparkling, white, red, rosé, again, like the Loire Valley. So the wines that come out of there aren't necessarily the most fancy and expensive, but they're a lot of fun. And if you are seeking out good producers, which there's getting more and more of, you can find some fun stuff. Also similar to the Loire, it's sort of Italy's heart of the natural wine movement, like the Loire is for France. Because it's a fertile region that grows a lot of different varietals and the land isn't as expensive as some more prestigious regions, it's become sort of a playground for natural winemakers to come in and experiment with a lot of stuff. La Stopa, if anyone has heard of La Stopa, we carry their wines at Arden. They're as natural and funky as you can get. They're not for the faint of heart, but they were sort of the pioneer of natural winemaking in the region. And because of that, a lot of other winemakers have started there as well. So there's a lot of organic, biodynamic, sustainable farming, like the wines we're drinking today, and just cool, fun stuff being produced. So that's sort of the geographical overview. Just like 2 quick words on history. I promise I won't bore you. But wine has been made in Emilia Romagna since around 700 BC from the Etruscans, who I think are Greek. I get confused when I see some of these names. I think the Etruscans were Greeks. And they sort of started viticulture in all of central Italy. And then the Romans came after that. So obviously we know they kept making wine there. And then in around 500 AD, the Lombards, who are Germanic tribes, came in and took over northern Italy. And on a lot of the Italian websites I was finding, they called them the barbarians. And I was like, I don't think that is the official terminology. So the Lombards, I believe, is their official name. And that is what triggered this change from olive oil based cooking to butter and like fat based cooking. So they brought with them pig farming and started farming pigs in the region. And up until that time, you know, when the Romans were around, it was all about olive oil, olive oil, olive oil. That's what you cooked with. And suddenly when these German tribes took over, they started farming pigs. And so it became about pork fat and dairy, and that's when the shift changed in the cuisine, and it became heavier, richer, heartier, and that's also why Lambrusco became sparkling, which we'll talk about more in a second. So that's kind of fun that the wines in Emilia Romagna were literally shaped to pair with the food that was there in the region. And then I couldn't find exactly the date, but the Lombards were there for, I think, like 500 years before sort of Italian nations took back over, or Italian kingdoms. They, like the rest of Europe, got hit by phylloxera. Then they got hit by both world wars. So all of those had a significant damaging impact on the wine industries. And then, like a lot of these other wine regions that we've talked about in Europe, they kind of were so damaged after World War II, they shifted to this co-op model where they just started producing like cheap, you know, mass-produced wines that weren't, you know, they weren't anything special. And so they sort of succumbed to that. And in the 70s, like we've talked about with Germany and Blue Nun, the same thing happened. They realized that America was this big burgeoning market with the economy booming. And, you know, after the war, America was doing better than ever. And they had a sweet tooth. And so everyone started making this like crappy sweet wine that they knew Americans would love, even though it wasn't what people were drinking in Germany or in Italy. And so they started shifting their Lambrusco to be like really syrupy and sweet and mass producing it and exporting it to the US. So that's why we think of Lambrusco is often this like sweet, icky thing. It wasn't necessarily true to the style they were drinking there. And now winemakers are trying to shift that image back. But it did kind of some permanent damage to the Lambrusco industry. Okay, so let's talk about, that's sort of an overview of the region. If I missed anything or if you have any questions on anything I said, just let me know. But let's shift and talk about Albana. So Albana is the grape varietal of our first wine that we're going to be trying. And the producer on this is Francesconi Paolo. But let's just talk about the grape varietal itself for a second. So it's been cultivated since the Roman times, and albus, the root of the name, means white. Albus Dumbledore, anyone? So it was sort of the Romans, at least in that region, preeminent white varietal. And Ravenna, just show you this map again. Ravenna, so we're talking about Romagna here. We're talking about this side of the region because at this time, Emilia was still its own thing run by the Lombards or the Germanic tribes. And then over here, this was still Roman owned and operated, if you will. So this cuisine is still olive oil based. So Ravenna right here used to be the capital of the Western Roman Empire, and Albana was sort of their favorite grape varietal. And there's a lot of mythology around it. Apparently, the emperor took his daughter to this little village and they poured her in some humble terracotta cup, some Albana, and she drank it. And she loved it so much, she said, "This should be drank in gold," which in Italian is Berti in oro. And so the village itself changed its name to Bertinoro, which is still one of the towns in Ravenna. And then throughout the province of Ravenna, Albana is still traditionally served in gold cups or gold chalices. So it's sort of their favorite white varietal. There's also like Malvasia grown in the region. That's sort of and Malvasia is also grown in Emilia as well, but Albana is the main white grape of Romagna. And it's a light-bodied varietal that has a lot of acidity to it, that they like to pair with the food a lot. Even though the food is olive oil based, it's still close enough to Bologna that there's still a lot of richness, a lot of pastas, a lot of cheeses, stuff like that. The geography specifically in the Romagna region is a little different from Emilia. Emilia is really that breadbasket, more fertile soils where a lot of food grows. And as you get closer to Romagna, it's more chalk and limestone and sand, which is usually what we think of as being better for grapes. You are just ahead of us, aren't you? You're already giving us tasting notes, and that's a good tasting note. Sour apple Jolly Rancher. I would agree with that. The soils in Romagna are chalkier, more limestone based, more mineral driven, which we love for white wines because it gives them that great mineral texture. It allows the, kind of like bright acidity to shine through, gives it a nice mouthfeel, etc., etc. So yeah, let's taste the wine and see what we think. So put it in the glass. See if you can see the color. Tell me what you think of the color. It's definitely not oxidized, but it's not the lightest white wine I've ever seen. It's more of a yellowy color, I believe, in my opinion, more of like a straw yellow than like those really, really pale whites that are like star bright and with, little hints of green. This isn't orange by any means, but I would say it's like a true yellow. And that makes sense because this was cold soaked on the skins for, I think, like 2 days. So not really fermented on the skins. It's before fermentation starts, but just kind of to give it some extra texture. And this is, like I said, a high acid white. So often with a high acid white, that cold soak gives it just the hint of tannin to kind of balance out that acid. BMC said it was cool. Yeah, you missed it. I don't know when you came on. She already did her biscuit making. Now she's just chilling. A little bit golden in color. So let's look at the legs. Mine are pretty quick to form. I didn't even see what the alcohol was on this. 13%, so pretty average. It is it's a warm region because it's on the Adriatic. But it's also not as far south as like Sicily. We're still in northern Italy, pretty close to the Slovenian border, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So let's smell it. Tell me what you guys are smelling. you know, this isn't technically like an aromatic varietal, but I do think the aromatics are strong in this. I think it smells really nice. What are you guys getting? The first thing I thought of was green apple. Maybe it was just because I saw green apple Jolly Rancher, but I definitely think there's like some citrus, like fresh lemon or lime, green apple, maybe a little bit of like Asian pear in there. I get just the slightest hint of maybe like green almond. The delay kills me. It's like every time you guys write comments, I still can't see them. So they're gonna pop up in a second. So I hope you guys are commenting the same things that I'm smelling. But yeah, I think a lot of like fresh green stone fruit, maybe a little bit of like wild herbs in there, hint of like, you know, underripe almond. Maybe just a hint of like floral notes, but not too much. A little bit of jasmine maybe. Quince. Definitely lemon lime. Yep, absolutely. So let's taste it. Tell me what you guys think. I quite like this wine. Hope you guys agree. Honeysuckle, that's a great tasting note on it. There's definitely, tell me what you guys think about the acidity. It's very quenching, I would say. A bit of a sour note. Yeah, that's the acidity you're tasting. And to be honest, like I like acid, so I wouldn't mind drinking this on its own on a hot day. But it's a great food pairing wine. We had a little time at the end of the night, and studying for Emilia Romagna was making me super hungry because of all the famous food. And so I'll come back to this in a second, but Charlie's saying it's like the Fino a little bit. Yeah, I can kind of see that. You know, there's just this hint of nuttiness. Even though this isn't oxidized, there's like this little bit of nuttiness that I feel like is there, along with those fresh citrus notes. Obviously, it doesn't have the heat, you know, the alcohol that the Fino did, and I would say that there's higher acid in this, and a little more like fruit notes, but I do think there's like an interesting little parallel there. Well noted. But when I was reading about Albana, it said that one of the classic pairings was capelletti in brodo, which is hilarious because we literally have that dish on our menu right now at Arden. Capelletti is similar to tortellini, both of which apparently came from Bologna, or at least they have popularized them there. But they're both filled pastas, kind of look like they're folded, kind of look like little hats. But a traditional dish in Bologna is to serve a pasta like that in broth or in brodo. So they'll do tortellini in brodo, capelletti in brodo, and the broth, ours is just a Parmesan broth, so it's vegetarian, but often they'll be like chicken broth. But apparently that's a classic pairing with Albana. And so we made it last night and the whole staff tasted it and it was awesome together. And ours has a little bit of cured black olive, basil, some peeled cherry tomatoes, and then the ricotta pasta in the broth. And it was awesome with this. Because the richness does kind of like, the acidity cleans up the richness. But you're right, that the acidity is definitely prominent on its own. So to each their own, but try it with some pasta or with some cheese. I'll tell you what we paired with the Lambrusco when we get to it, and it was awesome. So yeah, kind of a fun wine. Noma says it's very refreshing on a hot day. I would agree with that. I think this is a great summer. I mean, again, you could have it year round, but especially when the weather is hot like this, I always want something that's just like refreshing. What else do I have to tell you about this wine? The producer itself, this is organic and biodynamic. He's in the same biodynamic collective as, if anyone's a biodynamic nerd, Nicolas Joly, who's arguably the most famous biodynamic winemaker of all time, who's in the Loire Valley. Go figure. It's the name of the wine itself is Vite in Fiore. You're not going to be able to read it anyway. It's backwards. But I believe that means lives in the flowers or life in the flowers. And biodynamic winemakers all often well, they have to kind of create biodiverse landscapes within their vineyards because they can't bring in outside fertilizers, any outside influence. So often they will cover the ground of the vineyard with wild herbs, wild flowers, stuff like that. So I assume that I know he said there's a lot of wild herbs in the vineyard, so there's probably flowers there as well. There's actually, this is technically a natural wine, but I love wines like this where there's nothing added to them. It's a wild fermentation. The only thing that's added is a little sulfur at bottling. And that's exactly what this is. And those are sort of the wines, at least the European wines, that I really like to purchase. If you do no sulfur at all, they can get really funky. I mean, all you have to do is try the La Stopa wines to discover that. But I love wines like this because they haven't manipulated them at all. They've just put a touch of sulfur in there that's a natural preservative in at the end. And you're really getting like an honest representation of the terroir, of the grape itself, of the vineyard, all that fun stuff. Oh, and then the other cool thing about this is that it's fermented and aged in neutral. Well, now I'm giving it away. I was going to ask if you detected any oak, but it's fermented and aged in neutral acacia barrels, which is kind of cool. And acacia is it's not as effusive, I don't know what the word is, as oak. It doesn't give as much flavor as oak does. It's a more like inert vessel that won't affect the flavor of the grapes as much. And it often gives, a little acacia flower we think of. It almost gives this slightly floral note to the wine, which may be why we were picking that up in here. So just kind of another little fun fact that, you don't have to use oak for stuff. And again, the delay on these comments, I just saw the comment of, do I detect a little oak? So maybe that does help with that little bit of, probably helps with the really high acidity to kind of tamper that down. And not give it richness, but just soften the edges a little bit, I would say. So I hope you guys like it. Do you have any other pairing ideas for what you would do with it? I know I told you the Cappelletti one, but you could probably think of a lot of those Adriatic dishes, grilled octopus is a good one. I know we've mentioned that one on here before. Some seafood, even oysters would be great with this, fresh pasta. I would probably go more, again, like more the olive oil route with this. Nothing too heavy and creamy. We love this white wine. Andy says it's a nice change of pace from your usual white wine varietals. Yeah, totally. I agree. I think it has a lot going on. It's a fun, complex white that isn't a Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Blanc or a Pinot Gris, It cuts through Sopressata beautifully. Awesome. Yeah, anything with acid this high is going to be really good with richness. So speaking of that, let's move on to the Lambrusco because I actually have a lot of stuff to tell you about Lambrusco, more than I thought I would. All right, Rosie, you ready for Lambrusco? Okay. Oh, can't reach it. So this producer here, also in the cool, young, hip, natural family, but again, does have some sulfites in there. This producer is called Paltrinieri. And they are just making Lambrusco. And they make a couple different ones. This one is called, I don't know if it's Solcho. And it's from one particular Lambrusco varietal. So before we talk about this specific wine, just a little bit of background on Lambrusco. So Lambrusco has been growing wild in this area of Italy for almost 20,000 years. So they've found fossilized remains of it and can somehow match the DNA. So there's debate around exactly what Lambrusco is. A lot of people say, and this is what I came about in my research, is that it's actually this varietal, which is Vitis labrusca. So I know I'll try not to get too nerdy about this, but we talk about Vitis vinifera, which is what I always thought was all of the grapes in Europe, which is wine to make grapes that are intended to ferment into wine that have been cultivated into winemaking grapes. But there's other grape varietals like Vitis labrusca, which, for example, Concord grapes are a part of. There's Vitis riparia, there's Vitis sylvestris. There's these other grape species that aren't what we ferment into wine nowadays. So apparently Vitis labrusca literally in Latin just means wild grape. So vitis is grape, labrusca just means wild or growing in the wild. And so it's a species that was native and just growing through Italy. And that's where the name Lambrusco is derived from, is this wild grape that came up in the region. Now, what I have found a bunch of conflicting information on, and I would love to ask a winemaker in the region and get a straight answer. Maybe no one knows, but I always thought Vitis labrusca was native to the Americas, Concord grapes, Catawba grapes, Niagara grapes. So it could just be that those two species are not related, that because it just means wild grape, that those species in America are technically what we now consider Vitis labrusca, and the grapes in Lambrusco are something different. Noma says she's worried she'll have some college memories of Lambrusco. I really hope you don't, because I think this one's quite good. But point is, I don't have a straight answer for you, but people think it's a separate species than Vitis vinifera. It's very close to Vitis vinifera, but apparently Vitis vinifera, the main distinction is that Vitis vinifera has been cultivated rather than grown wild. So most European varietals have been cultivated and, specifically grown and morphed and bred to create different things, whereas Vitis labrusca were just these grapes that were growing wild. So there's actually a couple different varietals of Lambrusco. There's actually over 60, or there have been historically. The 4 or 5 that are the most well-known are Lambrusco Salamino, which is what we're drinking here. It's a single varietal Lambrusco Salamino. Lambrusco Sorbera, which makes a lighter style, almost rosé looking Lambrusco. What else is there? There's Lambrusco Grasparosa, Lambrusco Maestri. There's a couple different ones, but those are the different varietals within the umbrella of the Lambrusco genus, which for all intents and purposes is very similar to Vitis vinifera. And I wish I had more clarity around that, but I just thought it was interesting because I did not know that. So, it has been grown. It's been in the region forever. The Romans, Pliny the Elder and Virgil, they describe Lambrusco. It wasn't sparkling at the time, but they describe the grape varietal. They call it Lambrusco. They talk about the flavor of it. So we know it's been around for a while. And then when the Lombards, the barbarians, when the Lombards came in, the Germanic tribes, and the shift happened to fattier food, that's when they started sparkling Lambrusco. That's when they started, over those couple hundred years, they sort of discovered the same thing that people in Champagne did, that they could hold the fermentation in the bottle itself and create sparkling wine. Yes, Luke, Pliny. I think that's this. I don't know. Am I pronouncing it totally wrong? I could be. I wouldn't know. Oh man, is everybody talking about Pliny the Elder? What do I not know about Pliny the Elder? I've heard the name, but honestly, I don't really know exactly who it is. Now I'm embarrassed if there's some crazy cultural reference that I don't know. I'm going to go look it up afterwards. So Lambrusco's been around, but the arrival of the Lombards is what inspired the shift to make Lambrusco sparkling. Oh, it's a beer. Okay. That makes sense because I'm not a beer drinker. But it's named after an actual Roman philosopher, I think. So, okay. All right. Back on track. So point is, Lambrusco became sparkling because bubbles cut through fat. That's why I always tell people champagne pairs with everything. You can drink champagne with your entree. It's such an awesome pairing for richness and fattiness. And someone asked what type of glass you would serve Lambrusco in. Mitch, I think you're Mitch. I drink bubbles out of a white wine glass. You could drink it out of flutes, but it's not as sparkling. So it's made in 2 different styles. Okay, I'm going to wrap my brain around this. It has been made traditionally in method champenoise styles. 2 fermentations, second one in bottle. And it was really the 1970s push towards mass producing sweet Lambrusco to ship to the US, where they started doing the tank method of sparkling it. A, because it's a lot cheaper to do. B, because it's quicker, so it makes it easier to mass produce. So at that point, Lambrusco stopped being method champenoise in a lot of cases and became the tank method, where they basically do the whole thing in tank. There's also the Charmat method, where that's the same thing. So you ferment it in barrel or in tank, and then you put it into a pressurized tank, and you add yeast and sugar. And because it's pressurized, it traps all the CO2, and so it sparkles it makes it fizzy. And then they bottle it from the pressurized tank into bottles. So it doesn't end up with bubbles that are as intense or as fine as champagne, which is why I wouldn't necessarily put it into a flute. Champagne is great in flutes because you really appreciate the delicacy of the bubbles, whereas Lambrusco is lightly sparkling. There's also a movement to go back to method champenoise style Lambrusco. This particular one isn't, but I still think it's a great example of that. It's hard because Lambrusco producers are in a hard place right now, where they're trying to kind of regain some street cred on the world stage and get some respect back for the product they're making. But there's a lot more labor and time that goes into making method champenoise sparkling wine, and so just by nature of that fact, you have to charge more for it, and people don't necessarily want to pay more for Lambrusco. So I think people's winemakers' strategy is to start making affordable Lambrusco that's really good and like gain more of a foothold, a little more respect in the marketplace. And then they'll probably start rolling out, at least to America, some more expensive bottlings of it. And Inder, this one is tank method. This is Charmat method. It's just a well done rendition of it. I have cat hair in my mouth, go figure. So what do I need to tell you? So this particular producer does single varietal bottlings of Lambrusco, and they take it very seriously. And again, it's part of the natural wine movement. There is sulfites in it at bottling, so it's pretty clean, but they do different varietal renditions of Lambrusco. So Lambrusco Salamino, which is what this one is, by nature, that varietal is darker in color. It's more tannic, it has more structure, it has nice acidity to it. So it makes a great food pairing, Lambrusco. Hi, Mikey, welcome, my cousin. Not shipping yet, but we'll talk. I can get you some wine. One of the other ones they make is from Lambrusco Sorbara, and that one looks more like a rosé, and you could drink it more like an aperitif. It's a little lighter in color, a little more floral, has a little more like watermelon, strawberry kind of notes. This, we should get some darker notes to it. So let's taste it. So right off the bat in the glass, tell me what you're noticing about the color, the intensity of the color. I mean, it's pretty deep, dark, like purpley. Almost has some like blue notes to it. For those of you who had the blueberry wine actually reminded me a lot of Lambrusco. So we might taste some similarities. But yeah, deep dark color, purple notes. As you can see, it's not super sparkling. Maybe it's just harder to tell in my glass, but it's fizzy when you pour it, but it's not like champagne where the bubbles are just, going up. Grape juice color for sure. Not much rim variation. Yep, I would agree with that, which tells us that it's not super old. It's probably on the younger side. The color molecules haven't had time to sort of fall out of the wine and change that color. Are they always this dark? The color surprised me. So again, it goes back to which varietals the winemaker is using. They might be making a rosé style, like not keeping it on the skins very long, or they might be using a varietal of Lambrusco that isn't as intense as this. So it's really just the choice of the winemaker. This one I think is pretty classic, so I wanted to show you a darker style. Concord grape juice, smells like cherry Dutch baby. That's awesome. Blackberry, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so smell it and smell it. I know you guys started giving me smelling notes, but yeah, you get like the grape, the blackberry, marionberry, boysenberry, all those great dark berries that we know so well in Oregon. a little bit of almost like violet. Do you guys pick that up? Like purple flowers, maybe even like a hint of lavender in there. Like it just smells fresh and juicy and fun. Almost in that, what I think of when I smell gamay, like fresh berries, and maybe some green notes. Similar to a Valpolicella. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, Valpolicella does have those really like fresh, and I don't know necessarily if you're referring to Ripasso or just the base Superiore wine, especially definitely the Superiore wine. You get those kind of fresh fruit, like light fruity, juicy notes. With Ripasso, we should do a wine tasting on these wine on Valpolicella. But you get more of that dried fruit, darker, inkier notes. So I could see that. All right. So it's hard to tell legs with sparkling wine, but mine are moving sort of medium, like fairly fast. I think this is probably also around 30. Oh, this is 11%. That would explain the fast legs. So yeah, a little bit, cool. Yeah. I was going to say cooler climate, but not necessarily. I think that with Lambrusco, they're trying to preserve acidity to make a balanced wine because it can be pretty fruity. So probably more of these more modern producers are picking on the earlier side to get that nice acidity in there. All right. So because I wanted to answer Andy's question, I believe the residual sugar in this is 5 grams per liter. The text sheet that I found was from an older vintage, and that's what it said. So I think that's probably pretty in line with what this is. I mean, this is still considered a dry Lambrusco, but there is just the teeniest hint. So it's kind of on par with like a brut champagne. Luke finds this wine odd. I mean, it is odd. It's a sparkling red wine, which just by nature of that's odd. And Lambrusco is sort of on its own in that category. I mean, I think they make sparkling Shiraz in Australia, but other than that, there's not a lot of sparkling red wine in the world. Yeah, berry, cherry syrup, nose. I can sense that. I mean, what do you guys think about the acidity and the tannin? I definitely get some nice acidity in here. Like there's that hint of sweetness, but my mouth waters for a while after drinking it. It kind of cleans it all up. And there's just a little bit, it's not like tannic, but there's just a little bit of structure. So that's interesting. Carol says it tastes sweeter than we expected. Yeah, I mean, again, I would definitely still say this is a dry style Lambrusco. But I think the fruitiness of the grape itself, even if it's bone dry, because it's so like juicy and fruity, I think that helps with the perception of sweetness as well. And Kyle, it's not super tannic, but I mean, I feel it a little bit on my teeth, like more so than like the white wine. And you know, this sits on the skins, I think for probably 4 to 5 days, if I had to guess. So you get just a little bit of it in there. And Noma says it tastes less sweet than she expected. And maybe that's because you had those memories of the icky sweet, you know, Lambrusco from college. So hopefully that this is an improvement. So Lambrusco was specifically designed, this style, to go with the food of the region. So I really encourage you guys, I mean, I know you already have the bottle opened and maybe you're not having food from Bologna tonight, but if you want to save it, or if you want another bottle from me to go eat at a great Italian restaurant or cook some, I would encourage you to try it because this is the one thing that I thought was really interesting. Balsamic vinegar, Aceto Balsamico de Modena. This is also from Modena. So balsamic vinegar is actually made with Lambrusco grapes, which is awesome. It's made from the juice, the seeds, and the skins of Lambrusco grapes. So last night we got some Parmesan, and like the good legit Parmesan, which is from Parma and Reggiano, which are right next to Modena. And we drizzled it with like very high quality Aceto Balsamico. And it was incredibly good. And it made me realize how much Lambrusco tastes like balsamic. Not that it tastes like vinegar, but if you have some balsamic in your house, even just put some on your finger and then taste the wine, and they're so similar in like a weird, cool way. So sort of a fun fact. So Catherine, maybe Kat, says, when living in Germany, this wine was very common to drink. It was very inexpensive in Italian restaurants. Great, awesome, and great on a military budget. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's again, it's lost some street cred because of just the state of their wine industry post World War II, where they kind of opted for this co-op method, and then they got this bad reputation for icky sweet wine. And so in general, it is pretty affordable. You shouldn't be paying too much for Lambrusco, at least right now. Balsamic helps redeem it. And yeah, I don't necessarily expect you all to just love this wine. It's totally weird and different from probably most wines you've ever had. But it is sort of this iconic wine that exists in the European wine world. And I think this is a good example of it. So it's a fun one to show to you guys. And Andy says, now that you say it, I can smell balsamic. But yeah, if you don't have cooking plans for tonight, I encourage you to like whip up some bolognese sauce and like, hand make some egg yolk pasta and, put that in there, get some Parmesan, do some balsamic, get some mortadella. Here's another fun fact. And actually, yes, Carol says, when travel is opened up, can we all go on a food and wine tour? You're the second person this week to suggest that. So maybe I should start thinking about that. You guys all tell me where you want to go, and I would love to take you all on a trip somewhere. So would you suggest with red sauce dishes? Yeah, absolutely. I think with red sauce dishes are great. I think anything... this picks up like the fruitiness of this picks up tomato-based dishes well. And the bubbles and the acidity help cut through fatty meats, heavy pastas, butter, sauces, etc. Same thing happened to Chianti after World War II, lots of crappy wine. Yeah, that was sort of a common trend that happened in a lot of Europe, and especially European countries that maybe fell on the wrong side of the war at some point, and their economies were damaged, all that stuff. The other fun fact I was going to tell you about this. So like I said, this varietal on this wine is Lambrusco Salamino. And it's named that because the clusters of grapes on the vine are very cylindrical and they looked like the salami that was produced in the region. So they named them Salamino in honor of that. So I bet this would be great with salami as well. Anna says, Lambrusco always makes me think of playing Italian card games and eating pasta late at night. If that was your childhood, I'm very jealous. That sounds amazing. It's a very like wine of the people sort of wine. Because historically, like they developed it for their own food. They developed it to taste good with their food so that they could enjoy it rather than developing it whereas champagne was sort of developed as a luxury product that kings and queens and czars loved and were drinking, and it was glamorous. It wasn't for the pleasure of like the vignerons of Champagne. But this, it was like, oh, we want something that goes really well with the food we love so much. And so I think that's kind of fun. Wine of the people. This whole study session made me really want to go to the region. I didn't know I wanted to go to Emilia Romagna so much. And Bologna sounds super cool. And just all the crazy food that comes out of there. What are you guys' thoughts on these wines? Or any last thoughts on Lambrusco? Hi, Paolo or Erica. I'm not sure who that is from Alora, but welcome. We just talked about Lambrusco and Albana. Any dishes that you guys, in fact, you should go see Paolo at Cafe Alora and have some Lambrusco or Albana with some of his food, because I bet it would be great. And they're only a block from us. But anything that you guys think would pair really well, or any thoughts on the wines or the regions? I was really blown away by learning that Lambrusco came from the Labrusca genus, and I really want to find more information on that. How do we get a case of this? You just email me. Oh, this is something to just mention. A couple of you guys have Instagrammed me with questions or requests for wine. And that's fine, but I am sometimes not great about Instagram, and sometimes the messaging is weird. Like it won't, if I don't already follow you, then it puts it in some hidden message inbox that I don't necessarily notice. So the safest way to get to me is just email me, Kelsey or info@ardenpdx.com. Both will go to me. Kelsey will go directly to me. Info might take me a little bit to sift through stuff, but Kelsey@ardenpdx.com is the most surefire way to grab me. And I'm good about looking at that all the time. Sarah says she likes it, currently having with sourdough and olive oil. Awesome. Yeah, throw some balsamic in the mix, and I bet that'll spice up the pairing as well. I like the Lambrusco better, actually. Cool. It took a couple of sips to get into it, but it's a nice change. Awesome. Yeah, it's a fun wine, and it's weird. In America, well, I don't even know where this traditionally started, but a lot of people will drink it with Thanksgiving. I know that's a little far off, but it's a really great pairing with Thanksgiving, with like, the poultry and the cranberry sauce and a lot of the like sage and herbs that are involved in Thanksgiving. So that's kind of a fun time to pull out Lambrusco. And again, it's not super expensive. So if you want to like get a bunch of people drunk, it's a good option. Does this wine age well? I would not age this wine. And the reason for that is that the pleasure in it, I think, is like that juicy, fruity quality, and that fades off with age. So, like a Beaujolais Nouveau or, like some of these lighter, fruitier, juicier varietals, if you age them for a long time, this doesn't have a lot of tannin either, and it needs that tannic structure. Wine needs fruit, acid, and tannin to age. Definitely has the fruit, and it has decent acidity, but I don't think that I think that the fruit would fade off and you'd be left with something that wasn't very interesting, I guess is my point. But that's a great question to ask, and it's something to always think about with these wines. What about phone number, text message? I don't like it when people text me because I try to leave my phone away at work or think about it as my personal device. And then I'll see something that's work related. It's like when I get to work, I just want to look at my computer. So, this is just kidding. Any other good pairings ideas for the first wine? Yeah, with the nuttiness in it, honestly, I would try it with Parmesan. Try it with some aged cheese, with pasta. I mean, again, when we had the dish last night, it was pasta filled with ricotta cheese. There was cured black olives, there was tomatoes, there was basil. So some of those classic Italian flavors went really, really well with it. I'm trying to think of other like quintessential, again, like grilled seafood, stuff you would find in the Adriatic, whether it's octopus or fish or shrimp, prawns or oysters, I think would be really good, just simply done with like some olive oil and lemon. I think this wine would really kind of bring out and balance the richness of some of those meats. Oh yeah, turkey and fixings, less alcohol, so it goes a long way, total. Luke is calling you out. Yeah, I think like go Google like classic Adriatic recipes. When I stayed in Italy for a summer nannying, I was on the Adriatic, but I was on the southern side, but it was still a lot of seafood and fresh vegetables, tomatoes, arugula, fresh cheese, mozzarella, excuse me, mozzarella. Oh, I'm dying over here. I don't even know what that was. Mozzarella, burrata, basil. They don't do, I feel like the food is simpler over there. And maybe, as you move further inland, like in Emilia, people are whipping up fancier, richer sauces and dishes. But my experience of being on the Adriatic was like the food, the ingredients were so fresh and amazing that you just like drizzled some olive oil and sea salt and you were good to go. We had it with prosciutto wrapped melon, and it was awesome. Yeah, we haven't talked much about prosciutto, but prosciutto is from the region. So maybe like prosciutto and figs. Figs would be great with the Lambrusco. Yeah, prosciutto, nuts. You could make a really nice summer salad. My mom makes a salad that's like melon topped with like prosciutto and I think it's feta and walnuts and basil and some olive oil and sea salt. It's really good. Can we do a sake tasting sometime, or is that outside your wheelhouse? I hadn't thought about that. I could definitely procure you guys some cool sake. And I am not a pro on sake by any means, but I have basic knowledge and I could study up enough to give you guys some fun sake information. That's cool. I love it when you guys tell me stuff you're interested in because I will make that happen. That would be really fun to do. And just a quick note, I know we still have one more tasting for the month of August, but I wanted to throw, I guess, two ideas out there, one sort of a poll and one more information. So the informational thing is that I'm going to move, at least for some of the tastings in the month, away from regions because we're sort of running out of a lot of regions, and we might do more stylistic based things like two different grape varietals one grape varietal from two different soil types, or a wine with oak and without oak, or, kind of looking at like what terroir does and what certain wine making techniques do to wines. So maybe in September, it might be like a stylistic one, another blind tasting one, and then two regions or something like that, if that sounds fun to you. And the other thing, I would just like to throw this out to you because I would love your feedback. I am toying with the idea of moving the live tasting from Sunday to Saturday. I'm not set on it, but I just wanted to throw it out there to see what you guys think. And selfishly, I'm considering it because the restaurant is closed on Sunday, so it makes it one of my 2 days off. And so I'm like, oh, maybe if I did it on Saturday, I would get a full day off on Sunday. But summer's going to be ending, and it's not like I'm going to have rivers to go to and beaches to go to at that point. So I was just curious, like, is that better or worse for people? And you don't have to tell me right now. And if you are sort of ambivalent about it, and I know a lot of people watch it after the fact anyway, so that's another reason I was toying with it. But if it really doesn't work for you, please let me know, because my worst fear would be switching it to Saturday and then no one can do it anymore. So think about it and shoot me an email and just let me know. But that might happen come September. And again, you could do it after the fact, but it's not quite as interactive and fun. Cool. Well, thank you guys immediately for the feedback. That's great to hear. But again, if it would be an issue for me, just let me know, because I'm just trying to get a feel of it from everyone. Better for pairing with a big dinner. And I guess you can just keep drinking and not worry about a hangover on Monday. Well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully I gave you an excuse to stay inside and hide from this heat. It's so weird and overcast. Are there fires right now or something? I don't know. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay cool. Katie, thank you for the Nike passes. Went to Nike store this morning. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are coming to the flaneur dinner on Thursday, I'm excited to see you guys there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we will be closed at the restaurant on Thursday because we're taking the whole team out to wine country. But great to see you guys as usual. Next week is going to be Alsace. Then we'll take a week off, but I will figure out the next schedule and release it. Thank you guys so much. Lots of love. See you next week. All right. Bye.